Welcome back to The Bridges Between Us, a podcast from CaringBridge, sharing real stories from real people navigating health journeys. Stories about caregiving, connection, uncertainty, and the many ways support shows up when life changes unexpectedly. My name is Andy Thieman. Today I'm talking with Sally Zibrowski. In 2021, she was a busy mom of 2 young boys working her way up the corporate ladder. She and her mom would talk almost every day. It was during those talks, Sally's mom started describing odd behaviors she was seeing in her husband and Sally's dad, Andy. Little things at first, like forgetting where he parked the car. But eventually, the forgetfulness got more worrisome. Those worries led to an Alzheimer's diagnosis and more. Sally's mom did a lot of the direct caregiving for Andy, but Sally was also a caregiver, caring for her mom. Sally's also the one who started the CaringBridge page for her dad and maintained it through his illness. This is her story, her dad's story, her mom's story. A story of a family thrust into a scary diagnosis, a big life change, and caregiving in its purest form. But Sally says it best.
My name is Sally Zibrowski. My dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and primary progressive aphasia in 2021. He was 71 years old when he got diagnosed, and he lived at home for 2 years before we moved him into a memory care facility in 2023. And when we moved him into memory care is when I started our CaringBridge page. My mom was she had just spent 2 years living with dad as the disease progressed. And by the time we moved him into memory care, the disease had progressed quite a bit, and it was a very highly, stressful situation. And when we moved him into CaringBridge, obviously a lot of friends and family were reaching out. And that's when I threw out the idea of starting a CaringBridge as a way to keep friends and family updated and take that burden off of all of the text messages and the phone calls that she was getting for an update, because it was exhausting at the end of the day to sit down on the couch and feel like you had to sit and respond to everybody's texts. And they all came with the best intention, but when you're getting texts saying, how's Dave or Andy, how's he doing? Obviously not great. It was a hard thing to respond to. So threw out the idea of starting a CaringBridge, and at the time she said it was way too much for her to take on. That would just be adding one thing to her plate. And I said, no, I will run the CaringBridge. I will run every post I put up, past you, to make sure it's okay. And she said she agreed to it. And that's how our CaringBridge started.
Oh, man. So she would relay the update. So you were the only text, really, she was receiving or call, and then you would turn it into a post?
Right. Yep. When I think back to our journey too, I always don't consider myself a caregiver. And it wasn't actually until I was talking to Brooke here at CaringBridge last year, telling her my story. And she goes, no, you were definitely a caregiver. But at the moment, I felt like I was caring for my mom more than I was for my dad. I was trying to make sure she was okay.
Sure.
And through, my contact, I would drive down to Rochester quite a bit. I always knew where things were at. And then I'd say, hey, Mom, we haven't done a post for a while. Here, I'll write up kind of like a current update. And we always like posting pictures that seem to get kind of the most attention, and tried to specifically find photos where he was smiling. And we really intentionally tried to make the posts positive, even though there could be some hard things going on that we weren't sharing. We really wanted to keep the CaringBridge more of a positive and uplifting place for people to see our updates until we couldn't make it positive anymore.
Tell me, how did it make your mom feel? I mean, I suppose, were you relaying anything to him, or was it for your mom to receive and to, because there were comments, and I'm sure she would, pay attention to what they were saying down below each post and everything. How did that go? How did she absorb what was happening on the CaringBridge?
When Dad was diagnosed in 2021, my mom said she remembers they came home. He sat down on the kitchen table and he looked at the pamphlet. They were in Rochester, so they were going to the Mayo Clinic. They'd come back from Mayo. He had the paperwork. He sat down at the kitchen table and he said, well, this is going to be fun. And it was almost like the next day, he didn't even remember that he had been diagnosed. We went through those next 2 years, me and my dad and I and my brother, we never talked to dad about his diagnosis. He never brought it up, and he never said to my mom, hey, should we tell the kids about this? And so she never asked him, do you want to tell the kids? So it was almost like we were living with this disease, but we would act like everything was fine when we were together. But behind the scenes, mom would also obviously communicate with me and my brother and let us know where things were at. But it was never something me and dad, we would talk about with him. And so when he moved into memory care, dad, his disease had progressed so far that he never knew this CaringBridge page ever existed. When the comments would start rolling in, it was more for mom. When at the end of an exhausting day, she'd lay down on the couch and she could scroll through our CaringBridge page and see all of the likes or the encouraging comments. And so to us, it was more like a realization that people cared maybe more than you think. And even though you don't hear from people all the time, they're thinking about you. They appreciate the updates and knowing where things are at.
Oh, that's great. I mean, tell me how, so it flipped relatively quickly from kind of life as usual to not, or had it been setting in for a while?
Yeah, when dad got diagnosed, he was 71 years old. Once we got the diagnosis, we could think back years prior to different scenarios where at the time we kind of just brushed them off. But once the diagnosis came, we realized we're like, wow, that was the disease. Most people, when they hear Alzheimer's, they think of, oh, does he forget his keys? Does he know who you are? There's a lot of behavior that comes with the disease that people, I don't think, realize. For us, one of the first, I guess, things that we experienced was paranoia with dad. When he would come to visit, he would bring his laptop and he'd want my husband to look at the laptop because he specifically is his antivirus software. He thought people were hacking into his computer all the time. And he would almost become obsessed with his laptop and he would sit and run the antivirus software every single day. And at the time I was thinking oh, he's just getting older, doesn't really understand technology. But now looking back, that was clearly the disease setting in. I won't go into all the specific details, but mom would wake up and dad would be in the garage looking for people because he thought people were hiding in the garage.
It's scary. It's hard.
Yeah. Yep. So a lot of paranoia is what came with this. And it is difficult because I think you're maybe in denial at the time too. My dad, he was a high school science teacher his entire career. To me, he was the smartest guy I knew. He always handled our finances as a family. He was also extremely athletic. He coached baseball at the high school that he taught for 18 seasons. He was the head coach. He played college baseball. He was a basketball referee, a high school basketball referee in the state of Minnesota for 40 years, golfer. We always joke that dad never ate sweets. He always ate very healthy. And so the thought of Alzheimer's just never seemed like it could be real to me because it felt like he was the spitting image of everything you could do right to avoid that kind of diagnosis, especially being so young, thinking he was probably mid-60s when he started experiencing symptoms. I'll go back to dad being a teacher. His district at the time had the rule of 90. So he was able to retire when his age plus the years he was teaching was 90. And so he was in his 50s when he retired. I was a senior in high school. And so a silver lining to all of this, feeling that he passed at such a young age, but the silver lining I see is he got 20 really great years not working and doing the things that he loved to do. And my mom retired during that period too, and they spent a few winters snowbirding down in Arizona. That very last year, they had plans to go to Arizona, but then with COVID and dad's, at the time, odd behavior, they ended up canceling that trip. And that was really hard for me and my mom, knowing that it just wasn't a good fit for them to go. And that's when I'd get sad because that's not what you want your retirement to look like. You should be healthy and enjoying your time together. So it was really difficult. My middle son was born in all of that as well. I work a corporate job, and it was getting hard managing family life with work. And me personally, I actually ended up taking 2 months off using FMLA just to focus on being there to support my mom through all of that. Not an easy decision to do something like that, but the more people I talked to, they said, "You're going to regret it. Family comes first." And that's what I tell the people that I manage at work. And so I said, if this is what I tell my people at work, that family comes first, you got to take care of yourself, I need to follow that and set an example, and a good example for the people that I manage at work too. So I took my own advice and took 2 months off, and
Nice.
I'll obviously never regret those 2 months of getting to be away from work and focusing on mom and visiting dad more often.
Did you almost wish that you could take time after that as well? Because 2 months is a long time to then really dive in headfirst, helping and caregiving for your mom who's caregiving. And then, like, tell me about how you were able to do you feel normal yet? Do you feel back? Is that a thing?
I don't think it is a thing. Those 2 months away from work, well, dad was in memory care. I think it gave me a new perspective when I came back to work, that we all have one life, and you get to spend it how you want to spend it, and you get to decide where your time lies. And I love work, I love my career, but at the end of the day, it's more about setting, or it made me realize the boundaries that you need to set between work and family and how to integrate those two. And I think I'm still figuring that out today. It goes in phases. When dad was still here, and now dad passed May 2025. I've since added a third. We have a little girl, Nellie, and she was able to meet grandpa before he passed away, which was extremely special. It's just an evolving thing. Life looks different now that dad's gone. It's me as the daughter trying to find different ways to support mom as she goes through these different stages of grief right now. One thing I realized too, specifically with Alzheimer's, is that you kind of have two stages of grief with this disease. You grieve them while they're physically still here, but they're not the same person they were before the disease was there. And now we're grieving him both physically and mentally. It's a journey, we'll say, for sure.
Yeah. So it's coming up on a year since he passed.
Yes. Yep. May is when he passed away.
And how has it been with your mom through these first holidays without him around and all that?
It's tough. I'm not afraid to say I've had a therapist through all of this too, making sure that I'm leaving space to grieve myself, but then also figuring out ways that I can support mom while she's grieving. And one thing that I've learned is you can't control somebody else's grief as much as you want to. And I need to let mom grieve, and I can't worry about that. She needs to experience it just like I need to experience it too. So we continue to work through it, and life it's different, and we miss him every single day.
Did you keep up the CaringBridge after? Like, how did you get through, like, the end of his life, and then did it continue on? Were you able to use it for your mom after that?
Well, that's a good question, because usually you think you see like an ending point with CaringBridge. And I do have to say that was one of the best things I think that came out of CaringBridge for me is, yes, I was able to keep family and friends updated. But now, since Dad's passed, I can go to his CaringBridge page and scroll through it, and it's like a journal, like a time capsule for me. I love all of the pictures that we posted throughout those 2 years because it brings back the good memories when Dad was still with us. That week when we knew his last week was coming, I would post, like, maybe it was every other day, letting people know Dad is still here, Dad is still here. And then when he passed, I was able to share his celebration of life info, his obituary. The funeral home was able to make a really nice video of photos that you can still go back and watch now. So I shared that on there. And then I did have another post that just showed different ways that Dad was being honored, or like his legacy was still being brought to life like last summer. So Dad's name, obviously David Anderson was his name, but a lot of people in his life called him Andy because the last name was Anderson. And because he loved baseball coats, I mentioned, we gave out Andy's sunflower seeds at his celebration. And so one of my brother's friends sent a picture of him at a Minnesota Twins game holding the sunflower seeds as like a nod to Dad. Him and my mom also had Minnesota Gopher football season tickets. And so their Gopher crew purchased him a paving stone at the U of M. And we made sure to post a picture of that paving stone on his CaringBridge as well. And then I was fortunate enough to be guest speaker at the CaringBridge fundraiser in Minneapolis last fall. So I made sure to share that on there as well, just as another way to continue to honor Dad. So I do keep it up here and there. Obviously not as many posts as before, but to me, kind of just like a time capsule of those last years and how we're maybe living his legacy out since he's passed.
It's amazing. I mean, I'm so glad you were able to use that and it worked so well for you. And I mean, I'm just curious, some people are hesitant to share, or they're resistant to asking for help, or they feel like starting a caring bridge means something that they don't want to be associated with. If you could give anyone a bit of advice about that, about like deciding, because that's a thing too, deciding to actually even start a caring bridge page is a choice and a commitment in a way. Is there any advice you'd give to someone who's listening now that is debating or considering?
That's a good question too. I think a lot of people don't want to publicly share sometimes what they're going through because, well, I think of Dad too. He was never a fan of Facebook or social media. He always thought it was people giving themselves a throne, is what Dad would say. You think about CaringBridge, one of the positives is it is like a social media platform. And I know we've talked about CaringBridge kind of being a social media platform, but for good. And so I think that's a thing to keep in mind, is that it's not like an attention seeking thing. It's a way to build connection and to get support. And so keeping in mind that your friends and your family want to support you more than you know, and they don't always know how to support. Some people just don't reach out because they don't want to overwhelm you. So thinking about Dad when he was in memory care, Mom would get a lot of text messages saying, "Hey Jane, is it a good day for me to come and visit Dave? Can I be there at 9 in the morning?" And this would be 9 o'clock at night. And of course we wanted visitors, and of course we wanted Dad to see familiar faces. But to Mom, that would give her a little stress and anxiety because she'd want to get there at 8 o'clock, make sure Dad had nice clothes on, his hair was done, his room looked nice, and it would add a little stress that way. And she had a really hard time saying, "Hey, 9's kind of early, can we do noon?" Or she felt like she would have to restructure her day to cater to his visitors. She made it work. She did her thing. But if we could use CaringBridge in a different way, it would be setting maybe those boundaries on visitors. That would be a good way to utilize CaringBridge. Thinking back, I do think I did that a few times, saying, when Dad's disease really progressed, and was able to tell folks, like, we really appreciated all the visitors, but at this time, we're going to respectfully ask that no more visitors when it got to a certain point. I see it as it was a way for us to update from friends and family, if maybe we could use it a little differently, would to be more comfortable in asking or talking about how we could use support. My mom didn't have animals, but like, hey, I could really use some support walking the dog or whatever it is, or I could use groceries. It's a way for that caregiver to kind of put it out to the masses and get help that way rather than sending it to one specific person, because that cannot always be comfortable.
Yeah. Because there are other options, but you're right, they're different. They are more out loud. They are more like if you're gonna post somewhere, it's probably gonna be Facebook or something, and then the whole world can see it. And
Yeah.
it's not what a lot of people want to do. And texts are just hard to manage, and phone calls, you can't tell the same story over and over. And so I'm glad that you found it and that you used it and it worked so well. I'm also curious about people who were paying attention. There were probably certain all-stars sort of in the audience, or the recipients, the people who were tuning in. Do you have any advice for people that are keeping track of someone via CaringBridge, and what the best way to show support might be, whether it's just a thumbs up or a comment? Do you have any good memories from comments that were made or interactions that were had on the platform?
I think the way CaringBridge helped us the most, honestly, for me, was being able to go to the page, and even if somebody didn't maybe like my post, but I could, we're able to see who visits the page, and even that itself was encouraging. Like, wow, they took time to sign in and to read how dad is doing, which just shows me a level of caring. And I know I've done that for other families too. Even maybe if I don't say anything, I'm thinking about them, even just reading their page, indirectly giving my thoughts and my prayers for whatever they're going through. And I can remember the post that I made when dad was kind of entering his final days. I think we got close to 60 comments, which is probably the most we got, through those 2 years ahead of like when I actually shared that he had passed away. But just those 60 comments right there saying, we're thinking of you, we're praying for you, a lot of he's in God's hands. And just those words of encouragement were extremely helpful for us as we went through that last week with dad. If you think of that, 60 comments would be very overwhelming if you were getting those by single text messages and feeling like you had to respond to everyone. For us, even those final weeks, it was very impactful and helpful to have that platform. And, then you can like it and they know that you saw that you saw their comment. I do think that helped us get through that last week of his life, definitely. One last thought that I might share quick too is anybody that's thinking about doing a CaringBridge post, it doesn't have to be the direct caregiver. In our case, I wasn't the direct caregiver. It can be overwhelming for the direct caregiver because it's another thing on their plate. So even if it's a family or friend, even removed, I think it can be extremely helpful and impactful. I think some people just think it needs to be them, or even if you're the one going through, CaringBridge isn't just used for obviously folks with Alzheimer's, but even if you're going through a medical issue, it doesn't have to be yourself that's doing these updates. It can be a close family or friend. And like in our scenario, I would have my mom proofread every post just to make sure I wasn't oversharing or I was sharing things that she wasn't comfortable with me putting on there. I think that can be really helpful for those that are on the verge of not knowing if they should start a CaringBridge or not to get that support.
There you have it. Certainly another story of resilience and perspective, but also a testament to CaringBridge in its purest form. From scheduling visitors to, of course, updating friends and family with details big or small. Having one centralized location for all updates is extremely helpful, especially when the alternative is making and receiving phone calls and texts, relaying the same updates over and over to family and friends. But it's not just about convenience. Like Sally said, her dad's CaringBridge now serves as a time capsule, a journal of good memories for Sally and her family. If you've been recently diagnosed or you're caregiving for a friend or family member, give CaringBridge another look. You might be surprised how helpful, maybe even cathartic, it can be. With that, we hope this podcast finds you well, and I'll see you next time.